If you are someone that is struggling with mobility issues due to Parkinson's disease, then today's video could absolutely be a game changer in improving your mobility in the community. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara, I'm a neurologic physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, and mindset to empower you to take total control of your health and your mobility. And today we're going to go over simple cues that you can be telling yourself when you are walking that can potentially eliminate some mobility issues, or at the very least, improve your mobility. So first, let's just talk about what causes mobility problems if you are someone that has Parkinson's disease. Most of you, if you have this disease, you know that has something to do with dopamine, but there's actually a lot of neurotransmitters. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, but dopamine isn't the only neurotransmitter that's impacted by someone that has Parkinson's. There are other inhibitory and excitatory neurotransmitters that are impacted. So excitatory neurotransmitters will excite or turn on a neuron. An inhibitory neurotransmitter kind of blocks or turns off a neuron. And because there's this disruption in these neurotransmitters, if you have Parkinson's disease, one theory is that it becomes difficult for your brain and your body to kind of turn on and turn off inhibitory and excitatory neurotransmitters at the right time, or alternate between the two. As far as movement, what that looks like is being able to modulate between turning on kind of a movement and turning off a movement. That system is not working properly. So first, the two big terms that we need to discuss when it comes to movement execution, or executing a voluntary task, is something we called feed forward and feedback. So feed forward mechanisms when it comes to voluntary movement is very efficient for humans to use. And basically it's like the brain is kind of looking ahead and kind of predicting what's coming up, and it'll have a kind of a movement pattern already in mind that's kind of like a shortcut code. So kind of like the command functions on your keyboard. It's kind of like your brain develops these command functions for predictions or predicting what's coming ahead. That is a feed forward mechanism. It is great. It makes us very efficient, and it takes a lot of the cognitive burden off of movement. So it's very effective. However, that alone would not be good enough, because it very much is a one and done kind of command. So it'd be like copy and paste. You can copy and paste something, but you can't change the text or the font or the size or anything like that. So although you're executing that movement, you can't really make any changes to it. So because of that, we have something called a feedback mechanism. And a feedback mechanism is something that we utilize when we're in motion. It's the fine adjustments we have to make when we're moving, when things aren't going as planned, or that prediction has some kind of an alteration in it, or what actually in real life comes out is altered. Then we must rely on feedback, or being able to make adjustments in motion. Now, what the researchers have written, and what kind of makes sense to me clinically, is that when someone has Parkinson's disease, they have difficulty with that feedback mechanism. And this describes so much to me, or helps me to understand so much. When I see someone that has Parkinson's, I can spot someone even out in the community if they have Parkinson's disease. What this usually looks like when it comes to someone who has Parkinson's is that you can use those command keys really well. You just can't make any adjustments. So let's say you're walking across the stage, or you're walking across a room, and there happens to be something on the ground. You might see that thing on the ground, but you can't make those adjustments in motion to make sure that for that step, you need to pick your foot up a little bit higher. So why does all of that matter for all of you guys, or if you are someone that has Parkinson's? The most important thing that I think is good awareness to have is that you don't really have good feedback, meaning you're not going to be able to make adjustments in while you're in motion. So when you are in unfamiliar situations, i.e. you're not in your home or anything like that, you're out in the community, you want to pay special attention, especially when it comes to reducing your risk of falling, of slowing down so that you don't have to make an adjustment in motion, and you'll have a better chance of being able to stop if you, for example, see something on the ground, stop and punch a new feed forward code, if that makes sense. So that's number one, slow down. Not all the time, but at least when you're in public or in an unfamiliar situation. The second thing I want to go over is what we call implicit and explicit learning. And this is something that I probably don't get right all the time and is very nuanced depending on what your symptoms are when it comes to Parkinson's disease. Implicit learning are kind of like unconscious learning, unconscious things that go on inside of our brain. Explicit learning requires a little bit more thinking. So a good example of implicit learning is when you teach a kid to ride a bike. What do? You don't tell them, okay, now pull up on the pedal, push down on the pedal, pull up on the pedal, push down on the pedal. Sometimes you don't even tell them to pedal. What do? You get behind their bike and you just push them, get them up to speed where you know that physics will just take over and the bike's just going to kind of do its thing if they're going at a certain speed, right? And you let them go and they learn implicitly, right? You don't give them a lot of cues. An example of explicit learning would, let's say you're learning how to play golf. You're thinking about your stance, you're thinking about how you're holding the club, you're thinking about your backswing. Maybe someone gave you a point to point your club towards or something. That's explicit learning. You are thinking about those things as you are doing the movement or as you're learning the movement. If it's as you're doing the movement, then it would be like an explicit cue, which we're going to get into. An implicit cue would be maybe you are just swinging, right? And you're not really thinking about it at all. You're just swinging that club back and forth. That'd be more like implicit cueing. And maybe some of you do that before you actually take your swing so that you don't have to do a lot of explicit thinking. I don't know. That's just an example. But hopefully now we understand the difference between implicit learning and cueing and explicit learning and cueing. Implicit, someone else just goes behind you, pushes that bike, gets you up to speed. You're not really thinking about anything. It's just kind of automatic. Explicit is you are thinking, lift the foot, lower the foot, lift the knee, lower the knee, lift the knee, lower the knee. Now, how does this relate to Parkinson's disease? Well, we know that the more cognitive deficits that someone has with Parkinson's, and again, not everyone suffers from a lot of cognitive impairments, especially in the early stages, but the greater the cognitive impairments, the more explicit learning is not going to stick. Meaning you can tell someone, stand up taller if you're a family member, if you're the patient, or you can even be thinking, I need to stand up taller, my posture is slouching. Or something that we do quite frequently, and I'll get into why I'm kind of backing off of this a little bit, is with handwriting. We'll give them really large ruled paper or even like kindergarten practice sheets of writing and say, touch the lines, touch the lines. That would be an explicit kind of cue or explicit learning. Other explicit cues are pick up your feet. How many of you heard that? And how frustrated do you get when you say, I am picking up my feet, I am picking up my feet? How frustrating is that? It's because those are explicit cues in that system does become impaired if you're someone that has Parkinson's disease. It becomes more challenging if you're someone that has some cognitive or thinking deficits associated with your Parkinson's disease. So for years, what we've been doing is we've been giving people external cues that are effective for a large amount of people. So metronomes, targets, or there's even that U-step walker that has a laser light on the ground. Giving someone a cue of where to place their foot is something that we use quite a bit that has been pretty effective. And here's where it gets a little bit nuanced. That is somewhat implicit, because now you're just focusing on that cue, or you're focusing on that metronome and you're stepping to the beat of that metronome. If you're someone that has Parkinson's disease, you probably know this because you probably learned that. But there are some researchers that theorize that is actually an explicit cue. And after reading the article that I read recently, I might agree with that because it works for some people, but it really doesn't work for everyone. So, what is this entire video all about? It's what would be a better cue if you are someone that has Parkinson's disease and you find that the things that you're doing in therapy just do not carry over into the real world. Well, first, as a therapist, we need to focus more on implicit learning, but also you as a patient focus on implicit cues. So instead of a metronome, singing a song to yourself and trying to move to yourself singing that song is a more implicit cue. So as opposed to listening to an external auditory cue of the metronome, try singing a song and try stepping to yourself singing that song. That would be more implicit. The other thing that you might want to try that is really effective is instead of saying take bigger steps, one thing that I found that works really well, and it's probably because it is more of an implicit cue, is to visualize someone that you've seen before or you've seen a lot. Maybe it's your favorite movie or actor or actress, and envision them in your head, hopefully someone that has good posture and has good walking, and try and mimic them. Right? That is more of an implicit cue because you're not thinking about the movement, but you're just visualizing that person and you're trying to model their behavior. That would be more of an implicit cue. When it comes to speaking, which is a big one, some people will just tell you to talk louder or big and loud is a program that many of you have been through. I think probably a better cue would be to visualize a speaker that you've listened to a lot, someone with a really robust voice, and think about modeling them. Visualize the speech they're doing and pretend that you are on that stage and you are trying to model that person. When it comes to posture, if you were in the military, I tell people to pretend like your general is standing in front of you again, and you have to model him, right? Because that's probably what you did if you were younger and you were in the military. So modeling that, visualizing that, and just all you're trying to do is model that behavior. That would be more of an implicit cue. Okay, so I know that there was a lot of explanation, but Parkinson's disease is extremely complicated and the symptoms are extremely diverse amongst people. So moral of the story, or long story short, if you are someone that has a lot of cognitive deficits associated with your Parkinson's disease, when it comes to movement, or voice or speaking, you want to try and think about more implicit cues, whether you have cognitive problems or not. Something that we know goes together with Parkinson's disease is losing that feedback mechanism that helps us to adjust our motion or adjust our movement in motion. So slowing down when you're in unfamiliar areas and knowing that you're not going to be able to adjust movements in motion as you did before, and to make appropriate adjustments for that. Most importantly, stopping when you get to a new environment, planning things out a little bit more. If you can see ahead and you see a curb's going to be up ahead, make sure you stop right before it and adjust your movement before you step over it, knowing that if you misjudge that curb, you're not going to be able to make that adjustment in motion. So hopefully you guys found that helpful. If you did, and you are someone that has Parkinson's disease and you have some strategies that you use to help you to improve your movement when you're out in the community, I would love it if you would share that in the description. Share that in the comments below. If you're new to this channel and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so that you'll get notified every time I upload new videos. I enjoyed spending time with y'all today, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.